So hello and welcome back to the MCC Brussels podcast. I'm Jacob Reynolds, delighted to be joined this week by our research fellow Richard Schenk. Welcome.
Nice to be here.
And welcome back to the podcast for Paul Rougerol,
Thank you for inviting me.
another one of our staff here at MCC Brussels. This week on the podcast, we're going to be talking about Ursula von der Leyen and Pfizergate and the EU's incredible ability to cover up corruption. We're going to be taking a look at Hungary, which is in the spotlight again for various rule of law supposed breaches and a potential ban on gay pride parade. We're also going to look at Manfred Weber, who's accused all right-voting people right across Europe of being just like the Nazis. And of course, we're going to touch very briefly on that slap that was dished out to Macron. So kicking off with Pfizergate, I mean, this has been a story rumbling through the European presses for quite a long time. It has all of the kind of great key ingredients of a classic political scandal and a case of corruption. We've got an enormous amount of money, maybe the biggest ever procurement that the European Union's ever done. We've got dodgy texts. We've got refusal to release information to journalists. And we've got this all happening in the European Union, which is supposed to be the kind of beacon of transparency. But Richard, what's at the heart of this scandal? Obviously, we've got text messages that may or may not show that improper procurement may have taken place in this kind of incredibly tense moment when the EU was scrambling to get vaccines and an awful lot of money was changing hands. But what's really at stake in the Pfizergate scandal?
Well, what's at the core? It's Regulation 1049/2001. And before our audience falls asleep, this is a very sharp sword that the European public has to hold the European institutions into account. This is a European regulation that enables every European citizen to request documents from the Commission, the Parliament, or other European Union institutions. This is super important to keep these institutions into account. You can basically go and ask the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen what document she had regarding the negotiations with one of the biggest issues back at the time in 2021, if I'm correct, or late 2020. When the European Union was negotiating this huge contracts with the pharmaceutical companies for COVID vaccines. So everyone is entitled to ask the Commission for these documents. And some journalists did from the, I forgot the outlet, that doesn't matter. And the European Commission basically said WhatsApp messages are not, or other kind of text messages are not documents, so they don't have to disclose it. And this is completely not in line with, because there were rulings issued on this, what constitutes a document and what not. And it was always the case that the European Commission had to release also text messages if somebody asked for them, because this is also some kind of document, an official email, so to kind, just in life, between parties there and back. And the Commission didn't want to disclose these text messages. They did everything to not disclose it, but now the court of the responsible court in the first instance ruled against the Commission, and then it was a disaster because the ruling basically completely dismissed the Commission's stance and ordered the revoke of the rejection of the disclosure. So now the same journalists can go back to the Commission and ask for the disclosure of these text messages. It's likely, though, that because this was only the first instance, that the Commission will go to the next instance and file a complaint against the first ruling. Nevertheless, this is a huge. Already now, it's very clear that these text messages have to contain something very important that the Commission does not want to disclose. And I very much hope that along the public pressure that it will be. Because if they continue the lawsuit, the Commission, then this issue will come back again and again and again. So we need to keep up the public pressure on the Commission, and we need to keep them accountable so that the goal has to be that they have to disclose these messages.
Yeah, so this is going to rumble on in as you say, in this first instance, a devastating court ruling for von der Leyen and the case against the Commission. But Paul, is this a classic case of the Commission and top EU officials constantly preaching transparency for everybody else, but secrecy for themselves?
Yeah, of course. Like even von der Leyen was like pushing transparency among European Commission, but this is not the first time we have an issue related to transparency. For example, we had the Qatar Gate 2 years ago. I think, if I remember well, up to 1.5 million of euros have been found in cash at places related to European Union people. And where does it come from? Is it from Qatar? Is it from Morocco? We don't know much. There was like the football cup, international football cup in Qatar display. So of course they wanted like to clear their image in front of the world. So it might be the reason, we don't know. And the issue is that how can people, how can the public trust European Union institution? I just take my case as an example. I wanted to withdraw 5,000 euros in cash just to buy a second-hand motorcycle in Germany.
No bragging on the podcast.
There is no bragging. 5,000 second-hand motorcycle left. I don't think it's bragging. But like it has been denied at first. Then I was a bit pushing, and like my bank asked me for a good reason to withdraw this like big amount of cash. And then I had like to go by car to France to withdraw exceptionally 2,000 euros in cash. So not the amount I was asking for. And it was only accepted by one of the 5 banks I asked. From where my account is.
Well, you should have just told them that you were going for a meeting with a European Parliament official. Right?
Yes, I would have get instantly like the cash I want. And like the problem is even bigger because I noticed that only 37% of MEPs are declaring their meeting with the lobbies that are like registered to the European Union institution. There were, I think, there are around 12,000 lobbies registered, and only 37% of MEPs are declaring their meeting with them. So I don't even understand how. We know the numbers, so it means that we know that not even half of the MEPs are declaring these meetings, and that's for me a big issue.
Yeah, so we know there's a transparency problem in across all the European institutions. We've encountered it ourselves when asking for information. In various cases, we got an ongoing a case about the involvement of the Commission in the Romanian elections. So we know that they don't like transparency. But Richard, something seems to happen to people when they come to Brussels that they seem to like lose all of their bearings around what constitutes proper public conduct, and suddenly start acting as if they are the ones that are just setting and completely above the law.
Well, there is not much publicity here in Brussels. That's a huge issue, and many people do not even understand what happens here. Still today, I don't know, 70 plus years of the European Union, European integration. Still today, we don't have a European public. The media outlets here are only a shadow of what's in the national capitals. Then we have all these European procedures are so complicated that it's expert knowledge what happens here. And this is only a very small community. So it's like the Brussels news world is almost like a local outlet. I think in Bretagne there are more journalists covering local politics than here in Brussels are covering European politics. And it's very cozy. So it's why should you cause some uproar? And many people don't even understand what's happening. Many corners of the European Union are basically never looked at. Nobody asks questions. What happens there in this Directorate General? What happens in this European Parliament committee? So it's very easy to get away with stuff that would immediately cause an uproar at home. I mean, everybody just should think about recent political scandals in their homes. Think of the local government in your city or in your village. And I'm pretty sure if there would be 1.5 million euros of mismanagement or corruption scandal that is linked to your mayor, that people would be all over this mayor, and he would have trouble getting reelected. This is not the case in Brussels. We don't have this direct link between public and responsible officials.
So moving on, turning to Hungary, been a week or a couple of weeks where things are ratcheting up in rule of law terms against Hungary. We've got new initiatives from the European Parliament to try and force a suspension of more funds from Hungary. We've got the mounting scandal over the so-called NGO law that Hungary's in the process of adopting, which restricts which enforces transparency for NGOs operating with foreign money in Hungary. But we couldn't avoid mentioning what is probably the biggest political scandal surrounding Hungary at the moment, which is that the government's in the process of putting forward legislation which would potentially ban the Pride LGBT Pride parade that takes place in Budapest every year. Now, Richard, lots of people like to paint this as a direct attack on democracy or freedom of speech or the right to assembly. We know that these people couldn't care less about the right to assembly because none of them so much as raised an eyelid when we were under attack on here in Brussels by people trying to shut down our events, and nobody ever talked about freedom of speech or assembly then. But what is this? What is the real kind of root of the drama around the Pride Parade in Budapest?
Well, if you look into the Pride parades across Europe and in the entire world, how they have developed over the recent years, it used to be about gay culture, and I think there is a generally high acceptance for gay culture nowadays, especially in the bigger cities, and many people accept a normal pride. But this led to a kind of like that needed to go further to get more attention and it became more and more less about gay and lesbian culture and much more about new fringe groups. You know, when I was in Munich and sort of my last Pride, people were around and in diapers and going in. It was the diaper king group or whatever. And I mean, this is something that is not accepted by everyone, and that raises more than some eyebrows. So, and this was the reason why the Hungarian government said, okay, Pride is allowed, but under conditions where all these very weird groups are cannot be seen by children and whatsoever. Obviously, this made the Pride in this form impossible, but nevertheless, the Pride in its old form would have been possible still, or they could have just used the private venue because this is also still allowed. And I think even you don't have to agree with this assessment of the Hungarian government, but I think it is the right of the member states to regulate this cultural issues, manifestations, demonstrations, how the youth should be protected from these issues. This is not an EU competency. This is something that should be left to the member states. They are vastly different cultures. People react to this differently in Amsterdam than they do in Constanza, for example. Yeah, this should be up to the people in the city to decide how they see this.
Yeah, of course, the opponents here, or as it were, our opponents here, are very quick to say that the European Union is a union of values and that our fundamental values are being broken when Hungary suggests that maybe it's not a particularly public-spirited act to go walking down the street in a diaper or dressed as a dog with a leash on, or well, whatever kinds of displays are on show there. Paul, one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is that Pride as an institution, or Pride Parades as an institution, kind of used to be about challenging power in some sense. It used to be about asserting a kind of independence versus power. Whereas what we have now is very different, isn't it? Because you've got an institution, Pride, which is supported by the European Commission, supported by all of the wealthy NGOs and charity organizations, and there's nothing really, as it were, countercultural in a Pride manifestation.
Yeah, sure. There, like the new. If you want to be a rebel nowadays, you need to be conservative. Being a pro LGBTQIA+, we shouldn't forget any letter. That's why we have the plus at the end. Like is everywhere. I remember like 2 weeks ago, I went back to France, and I went to a train station in Paris, and the only flag that was displayed there at the train station was the LG gay flag. Sorry, I will put it out quicker. And I agree. Like, who is threatening now LGBTQIA+ community nowadays? It's Islamists. It's not Western societies anymore. When we have gay beaten up on the streets, for example, in Paris, it's never by like traditional Catholic or stuff like this. Even if like most of them, I think, disagree with like
But
with
sexuality in that fashion.
yeah. I'm not even talking about it, but like they don't shout it out. They don't provoke. They don't fight. They do nothing. They just live their life, and they just want to keep their children and themselves out of this. But when it's like in the public streets, then it's very hard. I agree with Richie about the fact that they can do it private. I think everything related to sexual life should remain private, and I don't think that we would accept any like straight people walking in diapers or like dressed as dog on the street. I don't understand why it should be accepted when it's related to gay community.
Yeah, but Richie, nonetheless, is there actually is there at all a freedom of speech or freedom of assembly issue here, or is this because one of the things that's happening at the moment is that it's becoming like the perfect case for the European Union, where you've got increasing pressure being put on the European Commission to act in some fashion against Hungary on this, and you kind of think if they hadn't have taken these steps to kind of the march to stop the march from taking place in its current form, they'd have had to invent almost a crisis like this one. It's like the perfect thing for opponents of Hungary.
Well, it's definitely a case of double moral standard. They only focus on this. Even if you say this is a freedom of speech issue, then they are like, or a freedom of assembly issue, then they are like vast cases across other member states where you can say, okay, their democratic values are being trampled upon. One of this from Germany, for example, this recent crackdown on people who post memes about politicians.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like way more significant than one demonstration in one city in Hungary, because they intimidated an entire nation into not criticizing your politicians online. So, but nobody talks about this, only about this Hungary case. So we need to really think about why have they singled out Hungary in this issue. The international situation with Ukraine is definitively connected. If you look into the most prominent newsletters, they literally combine the two issues into one section in the newsletter. And the other thing is that Hungary is like, I think half of Brussels wouldn't have any small talk if they couldn't talk about Hungary. It has become like a self-running machinery.
Yeah. Another aspect of this, Paul, is the way in which, and we've published a report that touches on this, but in fact, a couple of reports that look at this, but the way in which these slightly niche issues of LGBT kind of these slightly niche issues affecting very, very small minority of people who might be transgender, or very, very, very small minority of people who like dressing up in diapers, or whatever it might be. But these issues are very carefully weaponized against countries like Hungary. And so in that context, the Pride Parade is not what it used to be, because it forms part of the basis against which they challenge the conservative or traditionalist attitudes in certain member states.
Yeah, I think you got the point here. I think it's a cultural agenda. It's like definitely a way to change the whole culture of a country, which is on many cases like quite conservative, like Hungary. And I think this is for the bad. I agree. I get back on the point that Richard made about the fact that we Europeans, we have the same roots, we have the same cultural roots, I would say, but we evolved very differently through centuries, and now we see like we notice, I think everyone, when we travel in Europe, like great differences, especially talking about culture between the West and the East. And I don't think that it's for the bad. I think this is also where our beauty is, in our differences. And we face many French, for example, who are moving in East European countries, where they will be able like to raise a family and grow their children among conservative and like in conservative countries. And I think it's for the Commission a way to and through the founding like local NGOs, it's a way to develop and to spread their agenda, to spread their state of mind. And I think it's kind of imperialism, like the way like to come to a country and say, you should think this way, we think better than you, and we will like put the money on the table to make sure that your opponent will like grow faster than they should be, because if like the local people are against it, they won't like support it.
So coming now to Manfred Weber, chief of or kind of head honcho in the European People's Party, our bête noire here at an MCC Brussels. But as I said, something often is not exactly careful with his words, but in this case, something really quite extreme, basically saying that they're always going to refuse to work with politicians of properly conservative, what they call far-right politicians, but what we call conservative or right-wing politicians. They're going to refuse to work with them because he knows from Germany's past that the mistake is always to allow right-wing people to come into power. So, Richard, quite aside from the kind of sweeping historical generalizations and possibly the dodgy history involved here, this is the classic case, is it not, of centrist politicians attempting to use the legacy of Nazism to delegitimize anybody they disagree with.
Obviously, but Manfred Weber was for really dishonest. I mean, he has just used this extreme language to... we don't use the name of this person because the YouTube algorithm doesn't like it. Everybody can imagine who was the most famous German political leader in the 20th century. And he used, obviously, he invoked his name on purpose because it stirs up emotions. And by stirring up these emotions, he wanted to divert attention from the real issue, that he needs votes right of the European People's Party to get to get into power in the member states and into the European Commission. And because he's constantly trying to keep this center position where he can do both deals with the center left and the radical left even, and with the party's political groupings right to the EPP. So this is why he uses this extreme language, while on the other hand he's doing day-to-day business with both sides. And this is the European People's Party's true nature. This is a governing machine. They want to be in power. They want to keep their positions, and this is the only thing they care about. Don't get into a political ideology at the European People's Party, because there is none. They have no real convictions.
Paul, this is classic Manfred Weber in a sense, but very revealing of the kind of dominant mindset that occupies Brussels.
Yeah, sure. And what's quite interesting is that like the line, the far right line, I would say, is like moving. You know, it depends on if you are powerful enough, then surprisingly you are not that far right. You know, I will quote him very quickly. He said, "We are ready to include the serious conservative parties in Europe. For example, Giorgia Meloni, so from Fratelli d'Italia, has shown in Italy with Antonio Tajani, Forza Italia, that they are credible and that they have a central base." While at the same time, he's like refusing any discussion with Marine Le Pen, for example. So if I understand correctly, like conservative are not that conservative when they are like leading their countries. So maybe in 2027, if Marine Le Pen like becomes a French president, then she won't be seen like that conservative, and he will try to get her by his side.
So we close out the podcast this week with something that I'm sure we've all wanted to do at one time or another, which is a slap to the face of Emmanuel Macron. Paul, is obviously a domestic issue at some level, but it's also kind of revealing of the state of French politics and Macron as in particular. Yeah, like there are two sides of this coin. I see like the presidential figure, which is in my opinion, like this is a tragedy. You don't touch a president. Even if you are his wife or if you are her husband. Can you imagine like Putin being slapped by his wife, or Trump being slapped by his wife? I can definitely imagine Trump being slapped by his wife.
Okay, but not like that. And can you imagine if it would have happened to a woman, for example? Can you picture like Giorgia Meloni being slapped by her husband? It will be a disaster. Of course, and that's normal. I mean, that's normal. So I think this is like completely shocking, and the fact it's public, and the fact like they try to make it like, oh, okay, it's fine, it's just a domestic issue. No, like you're a president, so you can't it can't be seen. And the other side of the coin is like how quickly and how easily the French government lied about what happened. Like their first reaction was to say, "Oh, it's there are only images like generated by AI," and it served. Oh, how surprisingly it served like pro-Russian media.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they realized that it's actually their images, so it can't be fake, then they changed the version. Like they changed like the narrative. Wow, it shocked me. Much more than like the gesture itself. It means that they can lie so easily on like this topic. So what are they lying on? They can lie on anything else that we still didn't discover and that might be like much more important.
Mm-hmm. Richard, we don't endorse violence on the podcast at all, but anything that sees Macron taken down a peg is a good thing.
Not this way, because this is just weird. So we are going into tabloid territory now, but as Paul said, Macron is a head of state and he's the most powerful politician in France at the same time. So he represents the nation and he decides how the people will be ruled. And this is a sensitive issue, how he himself is conducting himself in the public. And if be it his wife or somebody else, if somebody slaps the president, this is indirectly a slap into the face of the French voters. Yeah, this is something that is a sensitive area. On top of that, Macron's marriage, as I said, tabloid territory here, but it's many people cannot identify themselves with this marriage, to put it mildly. So the danger that somebody is basically pulling the strings behind your president. And this you can literally see it in a slap. This is very a PR disaster for Macron, and this is something maybe that points to a bigger problem, how the French elite in general is conducting themselves, that they have lost a bit of touch, not only the elegance but also basically basic respect to the public office that they are holding, and this makes people really angry on the long term.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be it from us on the MC Brussels podcast. One topic we haven't talked about is the Polish presidential election, which is coming up. We'll digest the results of that next week. In the meantime, our viewers should watch. We've got a special interview on the Polish presidential election, on what it means, what the runoff looks like, what we might expect coming up this weekend. So we haven't talked about it on the podcast because our viewers can go and find that there. That will be in the notes for you to find here on YouTube. But for now, make sure that you're subscribing to the podcast. Make sure that you're leaving us a comment. Let us know how it's gone. But for now, thanks so much to Paul for joining us.
Thank you.
And Richie, thanks. Welcome back and thanks.
It was a pleasure.